Well, I'm now joined by Chris Davies from the Liberal Democrats and Nick Griffin from BNP. Both are North West MPs and both are going to the United Nations conference in Copenhagen. Chris Davies, you're going there, you're representing the people of the North West. What are you hoping is going to come out of Copenhagen? Well,
governments from across the world are convinced that we have a severe problem. It's not so much how much temperatures have risen now, it's what the predictions suggest for how much they'll rise during the course of the next few generations. So what I hope will come out is an agreement that we will collectively take measures to prevent temperatures rising by more than 2 degrees centigrade, an enormous amount given that 2 degrees centigrade was the difference between the last ice age and where we are now. And that's be an agreement that incorporates all the major countries, including China and America, which collectively emit some 40% of all the global warming gases, and an agreement that can be tightened up in years to come.
OK, and Nick Griffin, you are also going as part of the EU delegation, but you have said recently that you believe that the people who warn of climate change are cranks.
Certainly, there's no doubt that climate change takes place. It always has done. The climate does this. It's up and down and up and down. The people who are saying it's man-made and it's a potentially catastrophic problem are cranks, or they're in the pay of various business interests who it suits to go down this road. And the tragedy of the fact is that North America has lost 1/3 of its agricultural land, which used to produce food, to producing biofuels over the last 3 or 4 years, as a result of which millions of people are starving to death right now in the third world because of climate change alarmism.
But you've also said that the science is based on bullying, censorship and fraudulent statistics. So you're saying the science that Chris Davies is talking about is totally wrong?
Yes, an example, say, from your little programme there. In the commentary, it said there's the sceptics on one side and the scientists on the other. The fact is that 30,000 scientists have signed the Oregon petition saying that man-made global warming is effectively a fantasy. There's an enormous amount of scientific evidence showing that global warming is at best exaggerated, if worse, not there at all. But those are the scientists being kept away by bullying. They're the ones who are defunded in their research.
Chris?
I think the reality is that almost every government in the world, with the possible exception of Saudi Arabia, is convinced by the need to take action. Every government. And it's expensive. It'll lose them votes. They don't want to take these actions, but they recognise that the science commits them to make these changes.
There has been doubt poured on the science recently, though. Yeah, how seriously should we take, for instance, the leaked emails from East Anglia University?
Well, I think any question of the science being subjected to... Every aspect of the science needs to be subjected to scrutiny, because the United Nations panel of scientists says it only believes there's a 90% probability, not 100%, 90% probability that global warming is man-made. But, you know, if you're standing at an airport waiting for a plane and the pilot comes in the tannoy and says there's a problem with the engine and there's a 90% chance that this plane will crash, you don't get on that plane. You make sure it gets fixed. And remember, the measures to take to deal with this problem are sensible. I mean, it's about reducing our energy consumption. It's about saving energy, not wasting those resources.
I mean, you do talk about being a green party, so you must see that something has to be done.
Something has to be done, for instance, about the pollution which is damaging the glaciers on the Himalayas. There's no doubt about that. That's for China and India to sort out. It's not our problem. But the fact is that for the last 2-3 years, there has been so much global cooling that it's wiped out the previous 20 years of global warming.
So you are agreeing with some of the science there, that there is global warming?
No, I'm saying climate changes, there's no doubt about it. But at present, we've gone past a period when the climate was when the temperature was increasing. Now it's decreasing. And fundamentally, the IPCC's figures and all the figures which Chris's all the figures which Chris's people rely on are based on a fundamental flaw, because before the fall of the Soviet Union, there were something like 6,000 weather stations providing the figures.
Okay,
when Russia collapsed, sorry, I must finish this tiny bit. That when Russia collapsed, about 2,000 of those were taken out. When you take out of the world average 2,000 of the weather stations in some parts of the coldest parts of the world,
we're not scientists, so
of course it's going to make the world appear hotter.
Come back on that.
During the history of the planet, of course, it has warmed and it has cooled, but we have never before been in a situation where there are up to 6 and growing to 9 billion people on the planet. The difference this time is that global warming will result in appalling conditions for billions of people.
I mean, you talk about overpopulation being the cause of climate change in this country.
No, I certainly don't. Overpopulation is a problem in the third world.
Well, you do say that, in fact, that it is overpopulation that has caused pollution and climate change in this
Overpopulation
country?
causes pollution. There's a huge difference between pollution and global warming. Pollution is a fact. Global warming, the idea that CO2 is a serious problem and that man-made CO2 is a serious problem. This is a scientific theory, which is in fact not a scientific theory, because people like Chris are not allowing the scientists who put across a different point of view. They're not allowing them at Copenhagen. That's not a scientific theory. It's a religious fantasy.
That's clearly not the case. I think all views have to be heard. But just look at the measures that we should be taking in any case. We should be reducing our energy consumption because we're using fossil fuels, which are finite. We know that. It's a finite world. And of course, it saves money if we're not burning energy, wasting energy. We should be ensuring that we're not dependent upon Saudi Arabian oil and Russian oil.
Okay.
These are measures we should be taking anyway. What's the problem?
Gentlemen, Liberal Democrats and BNP have both called themselves the true green parties. So something like a wind farm in Frodsham, would you be in agreement with that?
Wind farms have a part to play. They're not by no means the solution to global warming, but they have a part to play. So much depends on the location. You know, if I look at the pictures we've just seen, and I know this area well, I could imagine I could quite tolerate a wind farm there. What I would find difficulty with personally would be a wind farm on the ridge, the Helsby-Frodsham sandstone ridge.
So it's about the view?
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to personal perceptions, and I think local people ultimately should be the ones who make the decision.
Wind farms, would you be happy if you lived in Frodsham to have one out of your view?
I'm going to have one put in front of the fields where I live very shortly. But no, I wouldn't be happy. I don't think it should be anywhere, because wind is a very inefficient power. We should be building nuclear power stations and getting into deep wave energy and not wasting time and money on wind power. But of course, there's all sorts of vested interests here. In the earlier debate, we were talking about carbon capture. But Chris is involved as a lobbyist with carbon capture companies, which stand to make a fortune out of that. He owns shares in a wind farm company. So there's an enormous bias going on here.
Back on that one.
Yeah, I get my electricity from a green supplier. It's called Good Energy. It's the only 100% green supplier. And it's quite true. I mean, if you look at the emissions from a coal-fired power station, they produce as much CO2 as is currently saved by every wind turbine in the country. So I think the development of other technologies, carbon capture and storage, for example, which takes the carbon out of coal, could be done at Fiddler's Ferry, for example.
Power. Liberal Democrats
Oh, well, my party's not in favour of nuclear power. I'm well known to take a dissenting view. I think you need a balance of these things. We need to explore all these technologies.
Okay.
And just remember, fighting this global warming, curbing climate change emissions, creates jobs.
OK, let me just ask you both now something. If tough targets are set in Copenhagen, what is this going to mean for the people of the North West? Because that's what they're interested in.
Well, the kind of targets are going to be set, or as a result, the government is going to be bringing in a tax of £3,300 on every single new car. That'll push up the price of every single car in the country, even the older ones. They're talking about a threefold increase over the next 10 years on tax on fuel. So it's going to make people very much poorer, and communities already hard up are going to be even more hard up.
OK, but...
Well, to curb emissions from cars, you increase their energy efficiency, you get more miles to the gallon, and you reduce your running costs. So, there's winners and losers, really.
I mean,
in the long term, you win.
What's the alternative if we don't get cars off the road?
But the alternative is that there is no solution. It's a whole range of things to do. One example, for example, I was involved in this 30 years ago as chairman of the Liverpool City Council's committee, trying to look at ways of using the waste heat from Fiddler's Ferry Power Station and many other industrial locations to heat the city centre. In other European cities, that is done. We have wasted 30 years of something which could have created many, many jobs and stopped us just wasting the energy and keeping our birds and fish warm.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Obviously, the differences are there, but thank you very much for joining us today. Now, that's all from the North West. As ever, if you want to contact us, then please do so via the website. We'd love to hear your comments on anything that we've discussed today. It's, of course, bbc.co.uk/politics show, and then just follow the links to the North West. That's it. Thank you to my guests. Bye-bye.